And action. Kath had a question about supplements for maximizing exercise. And two things. Number one, I love exercise, all forms of it. The exercise I used to do in my 20s is totally different than what I do now in my 50s. Two, I love nutrition, and it's so exciting to see the science behind nutrition. It's constantly changing, and that gets a little frustrating for some patients, but don't let it, because it doesn't necessarily debunk what happened before. It just adds layers to it and fine-tunes the old stuff. So it is very confusing though. However, I will be your translator. So let's get into it. Before I get into it though, if this is the first time you're finding me, I'm an integrative medicine practitioner, so that means I do medical stuff, I do alternative medicine stuff. The best of both worlds in my opinion. But hit the subscribe button down below and the alert button to find out when I send new videos to YouTube. Most of these topics are tutorials and or questions and answers from the day. So one of these things might pertain to you. So with regards to supplements or maximizing your exercise performance, I think we should first start with figuring out what the basic formula is. The basic formula is everybody should be exercising. As I mentioned, I used to do a lot in my 20s. I do kind of a lot in my 50s. I'm going to continue doing it in my 70s. It's not going to be the same though. So you have to exercise for your age and for your goals and for your, I guess for your medical diseases too. So everybody should be moving. The basic premise is if you move, you train muscle, you train joints, you push a little bit. And nobody thinks of walking or hiking as a form of training or bodybuilding or muscle building, but it is. Walking, Tai Chi, yoga, swimming, all that's actually, bicycling, cycling, is all actually just as important as doing resistance exercise in the gym or targeted muscle exercises with machines or free weights. So all of those things that we do strain muscle. When you strain muscle, you will eventually rebuild muscle if your body is working properly. Now that's where the gray zone is between straining muscle and rebuilding for a better tolerance for further straining, so you can get more tolerance and further straining. That's that constant cycle of breakdown, build up, breakdown, build up. That's even in work. If you have to do a lot of carrying because you're a FedEx or UPS driver, you have to do a lot of sitting and typing, even if it's tiny muscles, your muscles get accommodated to tolerate more than what you're used to. So that's the beautiful thing about this human body. This miracle is so adaptive, but it's adaptive. It could be adaptive faster if you gave the right building blocks. It could also be very poorly adaptive and downright damaged if you are deficient on these same building blocks. So I've come up with a couple basics. Some of the most common basics, which I have to mention because people take it for granted and they kind of put it low down on the list. Sleep. Sleep is so important. I know a lot of my CEOs and my 50 to 60 hour week workers say that they can get by with 5 hours of sleep a night. And that's good for you. But honestly, with rebuilding the brain tissue and having good problem solving, putting those memories away, rebuilding the adrenal cortex and the adrenal hormones overnight so that they're ready to fight and turn on the next morning, and to repair muscle, it takes at least 8 hours of sleep, deep sleep, good sleep, not tossing and turning, not waking up to pee 3 times, 4 times a night, deep sleep. So even if you don't think you need it because you sleep 5 hours or 6 hours and you think you sleep well, well, I challenge that. Usually when I hear that, I'll say, okay, well, that means you wake up very refreshed. Yes? No? And some people say, oh, well, I don't know. And then I'll say, does that mean you need coffee? Because that doesn't mean you're refreshed. And they'll say, oh, okay, I guess maybe I don't sleep well. So bottom line is sleep is very important. Just think about when you used to compete in high school or college athletics. Coach will never say, stay up all night before the game and before nationals because you'll do fine. No, he says, get a good night's sleep. In fact, some old-fashioned coaches say no sex night before. It's a wives' tale, really. But that's what, so coaches know, athletes know, embrace sleep. So if you're a weekend warrior or you're an occasional athlete, just realize this. If you hit the wall and don't make any more gains, or if you plateaued on your weight loss or your waistline loss, it could be because you're lacking sleep. So try to do it. Also, the opposite of sleep is important too. To stimulate a good workout, I don't like, I used to like Powerade or power drinks in the morning, energy drinks. But they're very addictive, they're expensive, they're not necessary. If again you have the building blocks, just take caffeine. And if you have reflux, you can do it with tea. Tea isn't as mind altering as coffee, but if you have a reflux issue, just try a little bit of espresso perhaps, because it's not as much volume. But if you do have a reflux thing, fix the reflux. See my old video, DrRic tutorial GERD, G-E-R-D, and it'll give you some ideas. So caffeine to stimulate a good workout. Jay Hoffman, an exercise physiologist out of my old school, University of Central Florida, did some studies where if you have caffeine before your workout, it does increase the potential 1 rep max lift if you're going for that. So there's some benefits to that. As far as caffeine and 1 hour energy or 5 hour energy drink or Red Bull, you're getting a lot of other things in there that's very highly processed. I'd rather just go with the coffee beans, you can see it. Creatine also works too. In the 90s and in the early millennium, people were worried about creatine because kids were overdoing it supposedly. You know, a 5-gram load of creatine about a week before your either 1 rep max or your max lift, I think is reasonable. And then ramping up to that 1 week. I don't think you should be on creatine all the time, although creatine does, because of its solute properties, give a little bit of a pump to the muscle. So there's some subjective strength feeling when you take creatine. I wouldn't do it all the time. So having said that, good sleep, you won't need too much energy, but if you need energy, that's what your options are. D-ribose, by the way, is a nice energy stimulator. It's sugar, but it's healthy sugar, and you can get it in powder form. Hydration is always important. I think we as Americans and on-the-road drivers usually really neglect hydration. And again, a lot of us can get by. I can take people, as long as I've taken hydration in the morning, taking my magnesium, I can take people on a long hike, a strenuous hike, and just have fluid for myself at the summit. I really tell most of my hikers when we go on my once-a-year excursions, try to hydrate about every hour and a half. That'll keep you safe, especially if you're on medicines, water pills, blood pressure pills, sugar pills, or diabetes medicines. It's important. But hydration would help if you're slightly dehydrated, which I think most Americans are, because we don't want to be interrupting work to pee too much. And we'd rather have Coke with caffeine than water. Remember, caffeine makes you pee, so it actually makes you more dehydrated, although the sugar makes you want more Coke. But I think most of us are dehydrated mildly. And when you're dehydrated mildly and you get that big pump, well, the lactic acid that builds up in the muscle has to get back to the liver via the Cori cycle to reproduce more energy. But if the highway is kind of narrow, meaning the blood vessels, because you're a little bit dehydrated, it'll take a longer time to process that lactic acid out of the muscle. And that's not good too, because that's prolonged damage. You will take longer to rebuild. You'll stretch out your exercises because you'll be sore for a longer amount of time. So push fluids. Stop at about dinner time so you don't pee all night. But when you're, the bottom line when I take my hikers out, if you're peeing and it's clear, you're hydrated. If you're peeing and it's dark, you're probably dehydrated. So that's a nice way to gauge. There's also other blood tests and saliva tests you can do. But just try to push a little bit more than you're used to, and you might find even sinuses and sinus infections get better. So sleep is important. Hydration is important. Now comes the food. Very, very important. And a lot of my folks that are starting out on an exercise routine or New Year's resolutions are also trying to cut back on calories. Or they're trying a new author, whether it's fasting mimicking, paleo, ketogenic, or just decreasing and going with the American Diabetic Association's diet. Whatever you're doing, the standard American diet, SAD, the standard American diet sucks. So if you don't have anybody to train you or help break down the knowledge of nutrition, at least try to push protein. Protein will be the building blocks for your muscles, your actin and myosin fibers to rebuild. So you have to have enough branched chain amino acids or protein. I like protein dominant meals because most of my patients are tired and fatigued, and protein dominant meals don't turn on the insulin response as much as carbohydrate dominant meals. And plus, if you're exercising, really, the guys in Canada, I think it was McMaster University, have really said you can push protein to almost 1.2 grams per kilo per day and higher without any detriment. I think there was a study out of California where they were worried and they watched people who were pushing protein per day, and they're worried about the ammonia buildup because you have to cleave off ammonia from the protein. But there was no, in the small studies, there was no damage to kidney or livers. So I think you'll be okay. Now, if you have kidney disease or liver disease pre-existing, you might want to be careful with what you take, but that's when you really have to have a nutritionist, a registered dietitian, somebody that's very good with designing an exercise and a dietary program for you. So building blocks are important. Carbohydrates for fuel, and if you're a keto person, fats for fuel, very important. I had taken care of a cyclist the other day, and the old thinking with cycling and marathon running is carb up the night before. I remember when I was in track and field back in the 80s, we would try to have pasta dinner before the track meet the next day, and obviously carbing up is a little bit different than that, but that's the old thinking. Made you feel good, but it probably caused a lot of inflammation, and you didn't need that. So there's exact ways to carb properly. Again, that's old school. Some people get by with it. If you've hit the wall, even if you're used to that old school training and you had benefit before, you might want to switch it up this time, find a different author, find a different practice. There's a lot of different ways that you can maximize on your nutrition. Whether you do proteins, carbs, or fats, it doesn't matter. I think ultimately most of the diets that are out there are great. I don't see one. With all the thousands of patients I take care of, I am not seeing one that's more dominantly better than any other. I think that it has to be, the best diet truly is the one that you can sustain. So try to get some help with breaking out of the standard American diet. Anti-inflammatory diet, Dr. Andy Weil, one of my teachers out of the University of Arizona, he has a lot of information online about the anti-inflammatory diet. So Google it, and maybe you can get some information. He actually has a pyramid that's pretty cool. I think Andy likes chocolate, and I think chocolate's actually on top of the pyramid. I don't like chocolate, but that's his pyramid. I'll probably make my own pyramid. But after taking care of your basic building blocks as far as fuel and not overeating, as Michael Pollan says, a whole food, mostly plant-based eating style, not too much. Then we go to the supplements, which a lot of people come into my office with, what do I take? I'm taking this. I have a lot of folks that I really am proud of because upon first meet, they're doing some pretty good stuff. And so I know my patients and my future patients are reading, this is cool. But sometimes we're spending too much money. Like the big one everybody's finding now is turmeric. Turmeric or turmeric/curcumin, great anti-inflammatory. The Indian culture is very profound with using turmeric in their dishes. I think that might be why Alzheimer's disease in India is one of the lowest countries in the world with Alzheimer's. There's probably other things too. But turmeric is great as an anti-inflammatory. I always, because of its price, I take Doctor's Best high potency curcumin because number one, it was approved by Consumer Lab. Number two, has black pepper in it. You always have to have black pepper in your turmeric sources for better absorption. Janet Funk, and check out my video, DrRic tutorial turmeric from the past, and I'll give you some ideas. But Janet Funk did a nice study that showed that if you wanted to change the inflammatory markers in a rheumatoid arthritis or an arthritis sufferer, the turmeric with black pepper got the markers down faster than just taking turmeric by itself. Even if these companies say it's going to be absorbed because we have a special supercritical formula, I'd still look for the black pepper. I've got some patients who actually take turmeric capsules and they take black pepper capsules because they like their turmeric. But whatever you do, turmeric's a great anti-inflammatory herb. Magnesium is a great, it's a mineral, but it works to decrease inflammation. And I really think a lot of Americans are low on magnesium. Stress seems to, because of the excessive amounts of cortisol, pull magnesium out of bone to get you ready for fight or flight. That's supposed to be like 3 times a year, but if you're kind of a little stressed out all day long, you're constantly pulling magnesium out of your bone, leading to low magnesium, because once it gets pulled out of the bone into the bloodstream, isn't utilized, it gets pooped and peed off. So I think magnesium helps. Those of you who have muscle cramps, hyperreactive reflexes when I check my patients and the reflexes are jumpy, or a twitchy tongue, or anxiety or palpitations, I think magnesium's lacking just by symptoms. But it's best to diagnose first before you supplement. And that's where not all magnesiums are good either. I like glycinate, I like aspartate, sometimes malate, but not all magnesiums are good. Not everybody needs magnesium. If you get a magnesium level, or if you have a kidney problem, you don't want to be taking too much if your magnesium level is high. So that leads me to saying, before diving into a whole bunch of supplements, you really should look at medical deficiencies first. I have my colleagues who say that my patients invest in a lot of vitamins and wind up just having very expensive pee. And I get it, because there aren't great studies that show vitamins, specific vitamins, make a better lifestyle. But anecdotally, my patients are doing great. I get my patients off of their medicines. I get my patients to lower, most of them, if I can't get them to lower their disease process or control the disease process, get off the medicines that they're on when they come to see me, then we try other things, or we try to minimize as best as possible, or just take care of the plain old deficiencies. I can tell you, most of my colleagues will check vitamin D. Typically when you get blood testing once a year, it's CBC for a blood count, comprehensive metabolic panel to see how your sugar, your kidneys, and your liver are doing, and then a vitamin D and something called a TSH, which is a thyroid test. Super sensitive, but it's one thyroid test. Now, I always include magnesium, B12. If I have a vegetarian, I'll put iodine and iron in there. So I think all those are important, and I usually will find in half my patients that there's a deficiency of some sort. You can't imagine that when I give my patients B12, whether oral or shot form, half of the fatigue goes away. So it's important to just take care of those little deficiencies that we commonly find that usually aren't checked. Once you take care of deficiencies, and that includes sugar if you're a diabetic, because sometimes the medicines like metformin will cause a B12 deficiency. Or if you're on a statin for cholesterol, fine, but sometimes that usually drives your CoQ10 level down and you have to take extra CoQ10. So the medicines that you might be on, or even hypertensive medicines, the water pills will make you lose more potassium and magnesium. So if you're on those medicines, they might have little side effects, and sometimes those little side effects will be accepted for the benefits of the medicine, lowering blood pressure, lowering cholesterol, controlling sugar. But you still have to make up the difference. So disease management first, and then you add on extra supplement here and there. And fish oil is also a great anti-inflammatory, also calms down the mind, helps with joint pain if you're older. Glucosamine sulfate, if you're older and you have arthritis, yes. If you're not older and it's just joint pain, I'd rather have you take turmeric, because glucosamine sulfate tends to upset the stomach. So we try to limit the list of supplements while we're in training. And if there's anything else, I would probably not throw away everything, but just limit, because taking too many supplements is tough on the stomach. It does give a little bit of a load of work to the liver. So these are the basics. And if you maintain the basics, theoretically, you should be able to get this system, this miracle of a body, to fix the damage that you created and get ready for more damage. I mean, if you could, that doesn't sound good, but if you can prepare for more stress to bone and muscle, that'll make you a more efficient human. And then the challenge is trying to push a little bit harder with either your training or exercise, so that you can get more out of your body. You can't push too hard, because then you'll get hurt. Or then the healing time, which is usually about 48 hours, the healing time will be a week. And you can't walk around with pain all day. That's not good to be in pain. That's a stressor. And it brings down the cortisol and makes sleep painful or decreased or interrupted. So you see, it's a nice even balance. And if you can't get to any of these points because you hit the wall and you've tried to do all this, then tell you what, either contact me via the Advocate portal, get in to see me, or get in to see your integrative medicine doctor so they can kind of manipulate these things. And if you can't get in to see a doctor because you don't have insurance, well, try to find somebody in your gym that looks pretty healthy, is a little bit knowledgeable, or read books. It's always important to read. I'd rather have you read than watch videos. I know you're watching this video, but sometimes the truncated form of a short video will give you some bullet points that are good, some bullet points that are bad, and if that's all you have to go with, fine, but go to your local library and start reading, because you'll really get to the depth of the concepts of what we as specialists and experts kind of try to give in a short amount of time. So hopefully this does help.